It was supposed to be a normal evening. Just dinner, a little conversation, and then we'd both go home. But that night didn't go the way I expected. Because when the rain started pouring outside and the streets flooded, she looked at me nervously and asked a question that completely changed the night. "Can we stay here tonight?" I froze for a second. Then I laughed awkwardly and said something I probably shouldn't have said. "I only have one bed." What happened after that changed everything between us. Her name was Sophie. We had only known each other for 3 weeks. We met at a small bookstore downtown when we both reached for the same novel at the same time. It felt like one of those cheesy movie moments. She laughed. I apologized. And somehow we ended up getting coffee together that same day. Since then, we'd been texting almost every night. So when she asked if I wanted to grab dinner, I said yes immediately. The evening was perfect. Good food. Easy conversation. She was funny, smart, and somehow made every awkward moment feel comfortable. But just as we finished dinner, the rain started. Not normal rain. A storm. Thunder echoed across the city. The streets flooded within minutes. Buses stopped running. Taxis were impossible to find. And her apartment was almost an hour away. We stood outside the restaurant looking at the pouring rain. She hugged her jacket and looked worried. Then she looked at me and quietly asked, "Can we stay here tonight?" I scratched the back of my neck nervously. "Well, there's something you should know." She tilted her head. "What?" "My apartment is really small." She laughed. "That's okay." I hesitated. "Anne, I only have one bed." She blinked. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she suddenly burst out laughing. "Relax," she said. "I'm not planning to steal your blanket." Her calm reaction somehow made me even more nervous. We walked through the rain toward my apartment building. The storm made the streets almost empty. The city lights reflected on the wet pavement. And somehow, the whole situation felt strangely romantic. When we reached my apartment, she stepped inside and looked around. It was tiny. A couch. A small kitchen. And a bedroom barely big enough for the bed. She smiled. "Cozy." I rubbed the back of my neck. "Yeah, that's one word for it." We changed into dry clothes. I gave her one of my oversized hoodies. It practically swallowed her whole. She sat on the couch while I made tea in the kitchen. The rain continued tapping against the windows. For hours, we talked. About childhood memories. About dreams. About the strange ways life brings people together. At some point, she looked at me seriously. "Do you believe in coincidences?" I shrugged. "Sometimes." She smiled softly. "I think meeting you wasn't one." Something about the way she said that made my heart beat faster. Around midnight, we both realized something. We were exhausted. And there was still only one bed. I grabbed a pillow and pointed to the couch. "I'll sleep here." She immediately shook her head. "That couch is tiny." "So is the bed," I replied. She crossed her arms. "Stop being dramatic." Then she said something that made my brain completely stop working. "We can share." I blinked. "What?" She rolled her eyes playfully. "It's just sleeping." But somehow, it didn't feel that simple that we both lay on opposite sides of the bed. A whole ocean of awkward space between us. Neither of us spoke. The rain continued outside. Minutes passed. Then suddenly she whispered, "Are you awake?" "Yes." She laughed quietly. "This is weird." "A little." Another silence. Then she said something that surprised me. "You know, I'm really glad the storm happened tonight." I turned my head toward her. "Why?" She smiled softly in the darkness. "Because otherwise we would have just said goodbye after dinner." The room felt quiet. Peaceful. Then she said something unexpected. "I almost didn't ask you out tonight." "Why?" She hesitated. "Because I like you more than I planned to." My heart skipped. I sat up slightly. "Sophie." She looked at me nervously. "What if this doesn't work?" she whispered. I thought for a moment. Then I smiled. "Then at least we'll know we tried." She looked at me, really looked at me. Then slowly leaned closer. Our first kiss was soft. Unexpected. But somehow perfect. The rain outside slowly faded. The storm that forced us together had finally passed. But something new had started. And as we fell asleep that night in the same bed, I realized something strange. Sometimes life doesn't bring people together in perfect ways. Sometimes it takes a storm. Sometimes it takes one small apartment. And sometimes it takes only one bed. The next morning, sunlight slowly filled the room. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then I realized something. Sophie was still there. She was asleep beside me, her hair slightly messy, the oversized hoodie still wrapped around her. And somehow, the apartment felt different. Warmer. Quieter. Happier. I carefully got out of bed and walked to the kitchen to make coffee. The smell slowly filled the apartment. A few minutes later, I heard soft footsteps behind me. "Morning," she said with a sleepy smile. I turned around and handed her a cup. "Morning." She took the cup and leaned against the counter. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Last night suddenly felt very real. Finally she laughed softly. "So, we survived the one-bed situation." I smiled. "Barely." She took a sip of coffee and looked out the window. The rain had stopped. The city looked calm again. Then she turned back to me and asked something unexpected. "Do you regret it?" My heart skipped a beat. "Regret what?" "Last night." I shook my head slowly. "Not even a little." Her smile grew. Then she said something that made my chest tighten. "Good, because I don't either." For a moment we just stood there, smiling like two people who had just discovered something important. Then she walked closer. "So," she said playfully, "does this mean we need another storm tonight?" I laughed. "Hopefully not." "But dinner again?" she asked. I looked at her and realized something. Last night started as an accident. But maybe it wasn't an accident at all. Maybe it was the beginning of something. "Dinner sounds perfect," I said. And as she smiled at me, I knew one thing for sure. That storm didn't just bring rain. It brought her into my life in a way I never expected. And somehow, I hoped sta dinner that evening felt different. Not awkward. Not forced. Just, natural. Sophie arrived at my apartment around 7. This time, there was no storm. No emergency. She was there because she wanted to be. I cooked pasta while she sat on the kitchen counter watching me like it was the most interesting thing in the world. "You cook a lot?" she asked. "Only when I'm trying to impress someone," I joked. She smiled. "Well, it's working." We ate, laughed, and talked for hours again. But at some point, I noticed something. She kept going quiet, like something was on her mind. Finally I asked, "Sophie, what's wrong?" She hesitated. Then took a deep breath. "There's something I didn't tell you." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" She looked down at the table. "I might be leaving the city." The words hit me harder than I expected. "Leaving?" She nodded slowly. "My job offered me a position in another city, 2 months from now." The room suddenly felt very quiet. After everything that had happened between us. After that night. After the kiss. The idea of her leaving felt wrong. I tried to smile. "That's great news." But she shook her head. "It doesn't feel great." "Why?" She looked at me. Because now, there was something in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Fear. Because I didn't expect to meet you. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then she said something softly. "I didn't want to tell you, because I didn't want things to get complicated." I leaned back in my chair. "But they already are." She nodded. "Yeah." Then she asked the question I wasn't ready for. "So what do we do now?" I looked at her. And realized something. Sometimes life doesn't give you easy timing. Sometimes the right person appears at the wrong moment. But that doesn't mean you walk away. "Sophie," I said quietly. "We have 2 months." She looked confused. "For what?" I smiled slightly. "To see if this is something worth fighting for." Her eyes softened. And slowly, she smiled back. Maybe the future was uncertain. Maybe she would leave. But for the first time since she told me, I didn't feel afraid. Because sometimes 2 months can change everything. The next 2 months passed faster than I expected. Sophie and I spent almost every day together. Late night walks. Coffee in the morning. Movie nights in my tiny apartment. Every moment felt important. Because we both knew, time was running out. The day she was supposed to leave finally arrived. Her suitcase stood near the door of her apartment. The hallway felt strangely quiet. She looked at me and tried to smile. "Well, this is it." My chest felt heavy. For weeks I kept telling myself to be strong. To be supportive. But standing there, watching her prepare to leave. Suddenly none of that felt possible. "Sophie," I said. She looked up. "Yeah?" I took a deep breath. "I don't think you should go." Her eyes widened. "What?" I stepped closer. "I mean, I know the job is important. I know this opportunity matters. But, so do we." For a moment she didn't move. Then she asked quietly, "Are you asking me to stay?" I shook my head slowly. "No." She looked confused. "I'm asking you to choose what makes you happy." Tears filled her eyes. "You make me happy." Those 4 words felt heavier than anything I'd ever heard. "But I don't want you to give up your dream because of me," I said. She smiled softly. "You don't understand." "What?" "I already turned the job down yesterday." My brain froze. "You, what?" She laughed through her tears. I realized something. "What?" She stepped closer and took my hand. "Some opportunities only come once in life. And you are one of them." For a moment the world felt completely still. Then I pulled her into a hug. And suddenly that tiny apartment hallway felt like the happiest place in the world. Later that night, we sat on my couch. The same couch where everything started. She looked around my small apartment and smiled. "You know, this place still only has 1 bed." I laughed. "Yeah." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "Good." "Why?" "Because now we don't have to pretend it's a problem." And as the city lights glowed outside the window, I realized something. That stormy night months ago wasn't just bad weather. It was the moment life decided to bring us together. And this time, neither of us was going anywhere.